السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. الحمد لله ذي العز المجيد والبطش الشديد المبدئ المعيد الفعال لما يريد المنتقم لمن عصاه بالنار بعد الإنذار بها والوعيد. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ولا ضد ولا نديد. وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله داعي إلى التوحيد. أما بعد، إخواني في الله, we are still continuing with our lecture series regarding the Day of Judgment. When we come out of our graves, what is the state of the world when we all come out of the grave? This is our lecture for tonight. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala benefit all of us in it. In our lecture yesterday, ikhwani fillah, we mentioned where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ اللَّهَ غَافِلًا عَمَّا يَعْمَلُ الظَّالِمُونَ إِنَّمَا يُؤَخِّرُهُمْ لِيَوْمٍ تَشْخَصُ فِيهِ الْأَبْصَارُ مهطعين مقنعي رؤوسهم لا يرتد إليهم طرفهم وأفئدتهم هواء. On the day of judgment, we come out of our graves. The men, the women, the jinn, all the animals that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created. And we, in particular, the men and the women, we're all naked. No clothes, uncircumcised and barefoot. Despite everyone being naked on that day, no one will be looking left or right. They shall be looking upwards, their eyes fixated in shock, in fear, in awe at the terror that is before them. For this is the day of judgment, the day يَوْمَ تُبَدَّلُ الْأَرْضُ غَيْرَ الْأَرْضِ وَالسَّمَاوَاتِ. The day Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala changes this earth completely, an earth that we cannot recognize anymore. Ikhwani fillah, what happens to the universe on the day of judgment? What happens to the sky? What happens to the earth? What happens to the mountains? What happens to the oceans? This is our lecture for tonight. Let us look at the horrifying nature of the day of judgment. Ikhwani fillah, point number one, the heaven, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will roll it up like a book, like a piece of paper. It will be rolled up like this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَمَا قَدَرُ اللَّهَ حَقَّ قَدْرِهِ وَالْأَرْضُ جَمِيعًا قَبْضَتُهُ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ وَالسَّمَاوَاتُ مَطْوِيَّاتٌ بِيَمِينِهِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will fold up the sky, will fold up the heavens with His right hand subhanahu wa ta'ala. So number one, the sky will be folded up. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, يَوْمَ نَطْوِي السَّمَاءَ كَطَيِّ السِّجِلِ الْكُتُبِ كَمَا بَدَأْنَا أَوَّلَ خَلْقٍ نُعِيدُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will fold the sky the same way a book or papers are folded up. So point number one, ikhwani fillah, the earth will change, the heavens will change. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will roll up the heaven. Allah's Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, he says, يَقْبِضُ اللَّهُ الْأَرْضَ يَوْمَ الْقِيَامَةِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will hold the earth on the day of judgment. وَيَطْوِي السَّمَاءَ بِيَمِينِهِ. And He will roll up or fold up the sky with His right hand. ثُمَّ يَقُولُ. Then He will say, أَنَا الْمَلِكُ. I am the king. أَيْنَ الْجَبَّارُونَ. Where are those arrogant people who thought that they were rulers upon this earth? Where are they? The people who claim that they were the kings of kings or leaders, or they will be أَنَا رَبُّكُمُ الْأَعْلَى. Where are these people? So point number one, ikhwani fillah, from the changes in the universe is the sky will not be the same sky. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will fold it up like a piece of book. Number two, the earth shall be changed to an earth that we cannot recognize anymore. It will be turned into dust. The mountains, do you know what the mountains are? What is the purpose of the creation of the mountains? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created these mountains so that they make our earth stable. We do not have earthquakes. We do not have unnecessary tremors if these mountains if they are there. The mountains were kept there for stability. And when people speak about the mountains, they say, مَثَلُ الْجَبَلِ, as strong as a mountain. On that day, ikhwani fillah, these mountains will become like cotton, like wool, like pieces of paper that fly in the air. Dust, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will turn it to dust. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَإِذَا نُفِخَ فِي الصُّورِ نَفْخَةٌ وَاحِدَةٌ وَحُمِّلَتِ الْأَرْضُ وَالْجِبَالُ فَدُكَّتَا دكة واحدة. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will destroy all the mountains in one time. These mountains that you think are the pinnacle of strength shall be all turned into dust, like sand. You hold it and you can blow it away. That is what remains of the mountains. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, يَوْمَ تَرْجُفُ الْأَرْضُ وَالْجِبَالُ وَكَانَتِ الْجِبَالُ كَثِيبًا مَهِيلًا. That these mountains will become dust. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَتَكُونُ الْجِبَالُ كَالْعِهْنِ وَتَكُونُ الْجِبَالُ كَالْعِهْنِ الْمَنْفُوشِ. They become like cotton wool. Ikhwani fillah, these mountains will no longer be present. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَإِذَا الْجِبَالُ سُيِّرَتْ. The mountains shall be moved away. وَسُيِّرَتِ الْجِبَالُ فَكَانَتْ سَرَابًا. These mountains will become like they're not present. This earth will be turned completely, ikhwani fillah. There shall be no point that is down or no point that is up. Everything will be flat. No mountains, no valleys, nothing. Everything will be flat. An earth that we cannot recognize anymore. So ikhwani fillah, point number one, the sky will be changed. Number two, the earth will be turned into dust. Number three, the mountains shall be blown away. Mount Everest, the Alps, the Andes, the Atlas, Mount Kilimanjaro, Mount Kenya, any mountain you can think of, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will turn to dust. It will no longer be existent. It serves no purpose. For this day, we do not want stability. We want this world to shake in terror, to shake with the punishment that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wishes to show on that day. Number three, the oceans. This world, ikhwani fillah, is at least 70% water. We have how many oceans in the world? Do I ask the children or the old ones? How many oceans do we have? How many in total? How many in total? We have 3 oceans. Who says 5? Who says 7? People need to go back for geography. This water, ikhwani fillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will cause an interesting thing to happen to it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَإِذَا الْبِحَارُ فُجِّرَتْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذَا الْبِحَارُ سُجِّرَتْ. That this water, instead of keeping out fire, this water will be burning. It will be burning. It will become like oil. This earth that is 70% water, all these water bodies shall be burning. They shall be burning fire. That is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will change all the water into fire. Burning fire. That is the day of judgment. Number 4, ikhwani fillah, the heaven, the sky, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will change everything about this sky. This sky is something very beautiful we look at. We admire it when you see it in the morning, the lovely blue sky. And you want to always be in such a time. You want to go to places that have summer and the reflection of the sky falls on the ocean, like in the Maldives or the Bahamas or some funny summer locations that people love. But that day, ikhwani fillah, everything about the sky changes. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَوْمَ تَمُورُ السَّمَاءُ مَوْرًا. That day, the sky will shake. This sky has no pillars, you can see, but it's very stable. It's a strong creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But on that day, it will shake violently. ثُمَّ تَنْفَطِرْ وَتَشَقَّقْ. Then it shall split open. The sky will split open into parts. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِذَا السَّمَاءُ انْفَطَرَتْ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِذَا السَّمَاءُ انْشَقَّتْ. So the sky, it will shake. Number 2, it shall split open. Number 3, it shall start exploding or blowing up into parts. This is what will happen to the sky. Then, because of all this damage that it takes, it's no longer that strong structure that we used to know it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَانْشَقَّتِ السَّمَاءُ فَهِيَ يَوْمَئِذٍ وَاهِيَةٌ. And the heaven will be split open on that day. It shall be very, very frail, very weak, da'if. It does not have any more strength. After all the damage going, it's shaken, number 1. Number 2, it's split. Number 3, it's blown up into parts. This is what will happen to the sky. And therein, ikhwani fillah, the sky on that day will not be the blue color that we expect it. It will turn into different colors. Sometimes red, sometimes yellow, sometimes black, sometimes green, to many different colors. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَإِذَا انشَقَّتِ السَّمَاءُ فَكَانَتْ وَرْدَةً كَالدِّهَانِ. So the sky, ikhwani fillah, will also change completely. And finally, ikhwani fillah, what will happen to the sun? What will happen to the moon? And what will happen to the stars? Ikhwani fillah, this sun that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created for us is very important for our lives. I had some scholars, they say, the distance between us and the sun, if it was to increase or reduce by some proportion, life on this world will not be possible. The sun plays a very important part to life. These days we see how much people, they collect solar power. They want this power. For you to have vegetation, agriculture, I remember some of the things we used to study, photosynthesis, you need sunlight. So this sun plays a very important part in our life. The moon plays an important part in our lives. We know the months because of the moon. It was a crescent, then it became a full moon, then it reduced. Then we know, tomorrow is the month of Ramadan. Tomorrow is the month of Hajj. We know all our ibadah based on this. يَسْأَلُونَكَ عَنِ الْأَهِلَّةِ قُلْ هِيَ مَوَاقِيتُ لِلنَّاسِ وَالْحَجِّ. This is the point for us. What will happen to the sun on that day? What will happen to the moon? And what will happen to the stars? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِذَا الشَّمْسُ كُوِّرَتْ, that the sun will be, you know the way you keep this amama, like this amama, bring this amama. This is an amama. So if you want to, I don't know how to keep it, but you have to turn it around. So the earth will be twisted around into a spear, the same way this amama is twisted over someone's head. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِذَا الشَّمْسُ كُوِّرَتْ, the sun will be twisted like that. When it is done like that, there will be no more light from the sun. And the sun shall be brought a distance of a mile. The sun will just be here, just not that distance we said before where life will be impossible or possible without it. It will be brought a distance from here. And people will be drowning in their sweat. People will be sweating so much and they will not have a shade except for the people that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant them a shade. So number one, the sun shall be kuwirat. It will be turned into like a sphere. Number two, the moon. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَإِذَا بَرِقَ الْبَصَرُ وَخَسَفَ الْقَمَرُ وَجُمِعَ الشَّمْسُ وَالْقَمَرُ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, when you are on that day, your eyes will be stunned. You will not be blinking for a single moment. No blinking completely. And you look up, the moon no longer has any light to reflect because it has an eclipse or it is combined together with the sun. The moon will have nothing on that day. What about the stars? The earth, we are part of this solar system where our star is the sun. But we have other stars with other solar systems and they benefit from those stars. What will happen to these beautiful stars that we see at night? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, وَإِذَا الْكَوَاكِبُ انْتَثَرَتْ وَإِذَا النُّجُومُ انْكَدَرَتْ. These stars that you are magnified by their beauty, khani fillah, they shall start falling down in the heavens. They become worthless. The same way like you have a necklace, you've bought your wife a beautiful pearl necklace. What happens when you remove the string from the necklace? It falls down completely and goes separate ways. That will happen to the stars on the day of judgment. So, ikhwani fillah, this is the day that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has promised all of us. A day equivalent to 50,000 years. A day that we shall be held to account for everything that we did in this dunya. ما لهذا الكتاب لا يغادر صغيرة ولا كبيرة إلا أحصاها ووجدوا ما عملوا حاضرة. This is the day that you shall be given your book. Akram, this is your book. You did this and this and this wrong things. You did this and this good things. And you have to answer for everything. And you stand on a day that is equivalent to 50,000 years. Tomorrow, ikhwani fillah, we shall look at the description of the scholars of the fearful day of judgment by Imam al-Qurtubi rahimahullah and the Imam al-Muhasibi. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to grant us thabat, to give us a shade on the day there's no shade other than the shade of Allah. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make us all amongst the people of Jannah and to protect us from the hellfire. رَبَّنَا آتِنَا فِي الدُّنْيَا حَسَنَةً وَفِي الْآخِرَةِ حَسَنَةً وَقِنَا عَذَابَ النَّارِ وَآخِرُ دَعْوَانَا الْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ رَبِّ الْعَالَمِينَ وَالسَّلَامُ عَلَيْكُمْ وَرَحْمَةُ اللَّهِ وَبَرَكَاتُهُ.